Perfect. Hello and welcome to today's event, From the Eye Straight Down to the Soul, a panel on how collecting begins with Griffin Art Projects adjunct curator, Dr. Karen Tam. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Fauna Ibarra, and I am the Public Programs and Residency Coordinator here at Griffin Art Projects. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that our work takes place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and Stolo nations, to whom we are deeply grateful. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. If you would like to see live captions displayed for today's presentations, you can enable this by selecting the CC Live Transcription button at the bottom of your screen. If you're experiencing any technical issues with the Zoom interface, we will also be live streaming to today's event on Griffin Art Projects Facebook, so you can watch from there as well. Lastly, I'll mention that there will also be a chance at the end of today's presentation for audience questions. So if at any point throughout the presentation you have a question for our presenters, feel free to type it in the Q&A dialog box. Without further ado, I'll introduce Dr. Karen Tam. Karen Tam is a Montreal-based artist and curator whose research focuses on the constructions and imaginations of cultures and communities through her installations, in which she recreates Chinese restaurants, karaoke lounge, opium dens, curio shops, and other sites of cultural encounters. Since 2000, she has exhibited her work and participated in residencies in North America, Europe, and China. Tam holds an MFA in sculpture from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and a PhD in cultural studies in Goldsmiths University of London. She is the adjunct curator at Griffin Art Projects and is a contributor to the Asia Collections Outside Asia, questioning artifacts, cultures, and identities in the museum, publication edited by Iside Carbon and Helen Wan, and to Alison Holm, the editor book, The Changing Landscape of China's Consumerism. She is represented by Gallery of Charbonneau. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Fanny. And thank you everyone for joining us today for the final event of the From the Eye Straight Down to the Soul film and panel series on collectors and collecting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the series before I introduce our special guests today. So drawing from themes in Griffin Art Projects' current exhibition, Per Diem, the Gerd Metzdorff Collection, curated by our director, Dr. Lisa Baldessera, I wanted to put together a program of films along with today's panel that could inspire the Griffin community to consider how anyone can appreciate, love, and collect art even on a modest income. And of course, the different approaches to being an art collector. So the three documentaries that we had filmed since, I guess, February, March in this series featured the stories of extraordinary art collectors, the Vogels and Agnes Gund. The first film we screened was Megumi Sasaki's Herb and Dorothy, that came out in 2008, which follows the Vogels, a couple who started their collection in 1960s Manhattan, purchasing works by then unknown artists and who have built one of the most important contemporary art collections in history. On their salaries as a retired postal worker and librarian. The film captures their passion and commitment to art and artists. And then we followed up, or we screened the follow-up to that. So it was called Herb and Dorothy 50 by 50 that came out in 2013, and that covered the launch of their national gift project of giving 50 artworks to each of the 50 states. Ms. Sasaki, the filmmaker, we were really lucky that she was able to join us for a Q&A session afterward. And if you missed it the first time, we've uploaded the Q&A to Griffin's YouTube channel. And then finally, the third film in our series was Emmy-nominated director Catherine Gunn's Aggie, which looks at the life and career of her mother, the collector and philanthropist Agnes or Aggie Gund, who sold a Roy Lichtenstein painting from her collection to fund criminal justice reform. So Through conversations between Aggie and artists, family, and friends, this film demonstrates the power of art to transform consciousness and inspire social change, as well as the unique role and potential of collectors to use art to fight injustice. So our panel today continues this thread with collectors from Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto in a conversation that will explore how collecting art begins and how art collections evolve over time and the relationships between artists and collectors. It'll also touch upon the notion of collecting as activism and the different ways that collectors and their collections nurture and support their communities. The title of the series, From the Eye Straight Down to the Soul, paraphrases artist Richard Tuttle's description of the Vogels and their approach to collecting in the documentary by Ms. Sasaki. I was also inspired by reading about the Vogels, Agnes Gunn, and collectors such as Pamela Joyner in the States, whose mission-driven collection actively supports Black artists as a way to reframe art history. So it's this idea of collecting as a form of activism and the importance of having relationships with artists and strategies of collecting for the purpose of expanding the visibility and as a way to support artists and groups historically underrepresented in museums and other private collections. So basically, I am thrilled that today's speakers, Pascal Desjardins, Roxanne, Arsenault, Jamie Cameron, and Christopher Bredt, collectors who are at different stages of their collecting practice and who also consider what it takes to support art and artists in today's society. So thank you so much. And I just wanted to mention that Dana Claxton, who was scheduled to be one of our other panelists, is not feeling well enough to join us today, but I do want to share a little bit about Dana for those of you who are not familiar with her work. She is a critically acclaimed artist working in film, photography, video installation, performance art, and has shown internationally and nationally in venues such as MoMA in New York or the National Gallery of Canada. She is head and a professor in the Department of Art History, Visual Art and Theory with the UBC, and is a member of Wood Mountain Lakota First Nations located in Southwest Saskatchewan, but she resides in Vancouver. Her collection began with Northwest Coast Indigenous women artists, of which there are 240 pieces, and has expanded to include Northwest Coast Indigenous men whose art features Indigenous women or female entities. So we wish you a speedy and full recovery, Dana, and look forward to learning more about your collection in a future event at the Griffin Art Projects. And as Fanny mentioned, like after the panel, our speakers and audience members can join Chat and Choose, which was initially conceived as part of the Who's Chinatown virtual conference. And it's just an informal mingling sessions for community members to connect and come together over virtual snacks and drinks. And it'll be moderated by members of Edmonton's Aya Collective. So our first speakers today are Pascal Desjardins and Roxanne Arsenault. Pascal has been working in the field of sound for 25 years. His interest in contemporary art manifests itself in the video production of artist portraits and in assisting in sound post-production for local and internationally renowned artists. In collaboration with Roxanne, he's also building a diverse collection of contemporary Canadian art that has earned him recognition in the art world. Roxanne has been active in the Montreal cultural milieu for over 15 years, particularly in contemporary art and music. She has been the co-director of the Centre d'Art et de Diffusion Clark since 2014 and holds a master's degree in art history. Her thesis has been transformed into the book Kitsch Québec, published by Édition Fide in 2021, of which she is a co-author. So I hand the floor to you both. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thank you for being there today. Yeah. Such amazing, and thank you for inviting us to be participants on that panel. It's always great to be able to talk about art.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. We are going to share a PowerPoint. It's going to be very simple, but we have loads to talk about. So let's just start this way. And yeah. Is this working for you? Yeah. All good?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. So we wanted to talk a little bit about our collection today.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a collection that's been, I guess I'll let you start because it's a collection that you started a while back.
Absolutely. Well, we can skip like directly to the presentation.
Yep.
So as a sound engineer, my background in art was not about like really studying about art history and everything. I have a minor though in art plastic, so it was like visual arts, like for like 25 years ago. So I really had like kind of a background anyways.
An interest.
Yeah. An interest, of course, because you know, I always loved art, but at some point in my life, I was reaching, you know, I was just doing enough money, but I was not doing a lot of money. And I really wanted to get that collection going. I had that idea anyway that I would love to live with art, because living with art is amazing. And it starts always like that. A collection is like, wow, it's such an amazing pleasure to be able to connect with some with some amazing works, and you cannot, you know, it's a special bond that you have with those pieces that you get like into your collection. So but as a sound engineer, of course, you know, it's always been the biggest part of my life, because I'm a sound engineer in advertisement. So I kind of work for the devil. So I really need to counterbalance my life with contemporary art. It really helps me to give a better sense of what I need to do for my time on this earth. So yeah, well, and I started collecting alone.
When was that?
It was like some kind of 14 years ago, something like that. And because we are together now, so it's really a joint action and consideration and talk, and you know, it's a very participating debates and everything. So it's really great.
Collaborative thing.
Exactly.
I guess we started dating 10 years ago, and when we did, I've been in contemporary art, like Karen said, for almost 20 years now. It's going to be 20 years next year. So I've never collected before that myself. And as a cultural worker, also the means are very, you know, meager, very thin. So being able to have this collection, this conversation on an everyday basis was quite important for me. And also being informed, but by what I see, by all the dossiers we get in, by the artists I work with, by my milieu, and having him do all this research by himself, because Pascal does a lot of research on him by himself.
Oh yes, I do.
Reads a lot and gets himself really informed in general. So it's really great because we get to have these really complex conversations around art. But I must say that my first collection, my first love was kitsch, and I've, for a while, my house was known as the Kitsch Museum. All the rooms are thematic. It is not like that anymore, although it is quite still intense.
You'll see some pictures.
And Karen asked me to send you a photo of my collection, which is sad because it's kind of, you know, slowly going away, but it's getting transformed in another way. But this book that I did, that Karen was telling you about, Kitsch Quebec, is not about my collection, but it is about different restaurants throughout the province that have thematic spaces between 1950 and 1980. And it is a way for me to talk about immigration and all sorts of important issues through the lens of commercial spaces. So this idea of representation and this idea of balance and this idea of activism through other ways is present in even in kitsch, which is what I want to say.
Exactly. And that love of kitsch of Roxanne is also informing a lot of part of our lives, because you see some picture of our home, you know, it's a really special home. So we can already start. You will
understand it soon enough.
Exactly.
Okay, so our home.
Yeah, so Roxanne always told me, just before we, we moved in together, because I moved in this beautiful home and we did beautiful renovations. So every single thing that you will see on those pictures are new. This is like 5 years ago, like renovations. So we redid everything as the 80s, the 60s, and the 70s. You'll see like different pictures, so you'll be able to find the era that we are covering in every single picture. But Roxanne never wanted to live in a white cube because she is working in some kind of in a gallery, so she didn't want to get home, in the evening and like being again in the white cube. So the way, and that's what I was talking about is, all the kitsch background from Roxanne informed a lot of what we did with the home.
A lot of her choices, yeah.
Exactly.
And Pascal at the same time didn't want to live in a home that was too clustered. So it was really like kind of this balance. So we really worked hard and had a lot of fun just coming up with these spaces. And contrarily to some people that will buy, I've heard this before, I've never met anyone who does this, but we've heard that some people will buy art to match their sofa. It is not our case. We will buy a piece of art and then it will kind of inform what we want to do with the space. So in this case, I don't know if you can see here, but on the right hand side, this huge piece by Alex McLeod informed the kind of the color scheme of what we wanted to do with the rest of the room. And then you can see here on the left hand side, there's a Max Wise over our bed, a small Nicolas Grenier, Gerd Metzdorff, a Chris Klein, and a Trisha Middleton that's here.
Exactly.
Now, since then, we've changed a lot, but yeah, it gives you a sense just of the pieces that can live in a room with us. And this is our living room upstairs. So there is stucco on the ceiling. This is new also. And we wanted to challenge also the pieces and put them on wallpaper. So this is quite rare. We don't see this. Usually contemporary art is like, you have to have a sort of architectural house. You have to have the means to have this and the huge space and all of it. Then us, it's a 1910 bungalow that we have in Montreal. So I think we did manage to find wallpaper that could dialogue with the piece by Nicolas Bayard, for instance, or with Valérie Blas. Here, there's a little Caroline Monet. Yeah.
Exactly. And we really, in order to be able to do those kind of beautiful collage beforehand, we had the picture of the work, and we tried different, wallpapers that would, be able to make that work still in part of something different, but not too intense.
No, so, yeah, still good for the piece.
Exactly.
This is our wall. The fake stone is also new. The arches with Janet Warner
and yeah, we have a beautiful Sherry Boyle that we'll see like a little later.
That's in the window.
That's
here.
In the window, exactly. Yeah. The safest place in the house.
In our house, where there's a lot of people and kids.
We invite so many people.
So it's important that it's safe, but still the art can have a place to live.
And what you see, this wall has been done 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So people that are coming like for the first time in our home often ask us, oh, okay, but that one was there. So no. We really wanted it to be that way. So
yeah. And this is our latest room that we've just done. So very 1978 to 1982 bronze wallpaper. It kind of looks like your grandmother's house, but we have like another Alex McLeod piece, but that's lit in a very traditional way. So it really playing with these eras, really playing. Playing is like a lot of what kind of drives us. Of course, the works are like very powerful in themselves, but how we challenge them in our home is we have a lot of fun doing that.
Exactly.
Also.
But we'll talk about.
This is my woman's den. So you know how there's like
Man
caves. Well, this is my woman's den. So this is where I keep my archives. I'm much more of a messier person than Pascal, so it's important for me to have spaces like this where I can actually just have put all my things in, but it doesn't stop us from even, and this is like in the basement. So this is a Scawanadi piece, and there's another Max Wise piece that's here. So art is everywhere in our house. Yeah, and it's still like, we still play with it, even in this old 100-year-old Italian basement, it's still happening here.
Exactly. And now it seems that we only talk about aesthetics, so that's why we are talking about like the direction of our collection right after. But yeah, it's really important for us like to be able to put some art like in those kind of environment and settings, because it makes the works really have kind of another not life, but how do you say,
another dimension.
Just a dimension, exactly. And it's that's it. It's
I think it also shows people that you can do, like I said,
exactly.
things differently. So our collection.
Exactly. So of course there's the aesthetics like of our home, but we try to be really oh, on n'a pas sauté
ça se peut, ouais. J'ai l'impression que...
So, for instance, our collection, for me, the first years of a collection, you don't know exactly what it means to you. You are getting some works, and then, the collection is really getting like a sense, and it has a life. And I really found that those values were exactly the right things why we collect. For us, yes, it's really about community. I spoke a lot about art, like in VIP events and everything, and a lot of people are talking to us about like money investment, and really, for us, it's not important. We are really investing in people, and this is really, really important, because like we said, we are directly like helping artists in their career, and we are really artist oriented because of Roxanne also, that is she's working like in a artist front center, so we are really about that. And we love that exactly that we are helping people directly. It's like buying a work is buying something very, very special from one person, sometimes through another, which is the gallerist. So it's really super intimate exactly
relationship.
And this is fabulous for us, really fabulous.
And I think that this idea of of course we think about works that would have meaning in a art history lineage, and about like eventually museums that might be interested, but we deliberately decided to not collect art from almost never, but like art from we're collecting art from artists that are alive, not deceased, so that really it has an impact directly on their livelihood, and that's really important for us also. And we try to what we love about it is that we can participate in a global reflection about contemporary issues on all sorts of levels. We do a lot of mediation through our collection, so we have a lot of people in different various contexts, and we try to transmit these values and knowledge through mediation of our collection. I mean, we're the type of people who will give like 2-hour-long tours of the house while drinking a glass of wine, but still, like, there's so many discussions that kind of emerge from every piece, and that's really exciting for us. And we try to communicate our passion for collecting, because we find that when we have people here and we're really fired up about some pieces, I think it really gives other people like the kind of maybe the will or to start collecting themselves.
Absolutely. So our collection, is getting, it was not always like that, but, after many years, we are tending to go for works that are a little more participating like in real issues like politics, identity, cultural issues, of course, decolonization. We have a lot of thinking, thoughts, discussion about decolonization with like queer, indigenous artists. We try to be aware of that, and art is a lot about that, because art is always the first thing that goes out, and afterwards like the society is like getting to it, and we also concerned about art history, of course, because we try to get some older pieces that might have like gives our collection a sense of history too, and a line of pursuit, and aesthetics, of course, at the end. But we really are trying to get important works for what's happening right now. So it is about history, what's happening right now. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think globally it's art that are works that are more conceptual in general than purely aesthetic. That's really what we're or decorative.
Yeah, we began with more aesthetic works, and now it's not the case anymore.
Yeah, and I think balance in our collection is really important. I'm going to go quickly through this because I see that time is flying and we haven't started starting to talk about the works, but we always try to find a good balance between gender, LGBTQ artists, having a lot of multicultural works, multidisciplinary, and First Nations. So really, every time we buy work, we're really making sure that, okay, like, yes, we don't have anything like this yet, or there's, trying to make sure that there's representation on all levels is really important for us.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, this is kind of a weird, catchy phrase. I'm really, that's maybe my advertisement background that made me write that thing, but it's really important. Our objective is really like to create some kind of a rigorous collection of powerful, innovative Canadian works, of course, from artists that will leave a trace in art history. We are getting towards that, just to we find ourselves like doing this after many years of collecting.
Yeah. So some examples?
Yes. I don't know if you know that amazing Indigenous queer artist named Nico Williams. He's a master in beading. Yeah. His considerations are also incredible. So we have like two works of him. So you see them both. The first one, which is like Rock On, is the actual Indian status card from Canada. Yeah. So, and it's such a weird card for some kind of a weird state, Indian status, which is like so old. It's an old naming, like for Indigenous people. And he always plays, he beads himself in some kind of like weird pauses. This one is Rock On because he's doing this like with his fingers, and we always thought that anyways, having that card is really, it's really historically super important, and it's kind of démodé, okay? Yeah. But still, and that work was just fantastic. Yeah.
And then, je suis pas sûre qu'on a le temps de.
Ouais, c'est vrai.
And Easy Burn is another piece. He's done it in four different shades, but we decided to keep this one. And it's all this relationship with
tobacco.
With tobacco and Indigenous culture. And then Skawinati that you had seen previously. This is a still from one of her videos from Time Traveler Diem. This is a work that really kind of moved me a lot the first time I saw it. So having a still of it is quite I feel really privileged to have this in our collection, about this story about Hunter who travels through time to see moments in time where Indigenous people had the upper hand, and kind of integrate himself in these various historical stories. So this is one of them. But so yeah, having this small still from this artist is really great.
We don't have like time to talk like really fully of Skawinaidi's work, but it's a really important artist for many things, and because she don't think that we have like territory enough like for indigenous nations, she got into internet like to regain new territory
in Second Life, to reclaim territory, which is amazing. Everything she's done with what she's doing with Aptech in Concordia is really quite stunning.
Of course, our amazing Sherry Boyle, that was, you know, I really dreamed about like having one of her work for many years. She's an amazing ceramist, and she works a lot in collaboration with like plenty of artists from either Nunavut or indigenous artists or Indian artists. She always tried to reinvent herself like through ceramic and painting, and that work was about how she felt in the Venice Biennale a few years ago when she was representing Canada, and she felt really abruptly not considered correctly. So she kind of did those works about like hand that are broken, and you know, and the hand being the thing that she uses to do her art. So
Marigold Santos, we put this here for many reasons. We really love Marigold's work. This is really early work from her. It's a huge piece. It's like, I don't know,
6 foot tall.
6 foot tall, yeah. And this piece is interesting also for us because we saw this piece in HB, which is a contemporary art drawing magazine that's based in Montreal, that comes from Montreal, and it was in there, and we really loved it. So we wrote to her. She wasn't represented at all, and we went for a studio visit at her house, at her studio, a studio visit at her house. Yeah. Anyways, and she still had these. They were still available. So we bought this one and another piece that's at her friend's house. And this was one of the first purchases that she's ever had. So it really gave her motivation. It gave her confidence to continue and to pursue this path. And we always felt really special having this piece in our house. So it's just a question of also showing that there's many different ways to be able to collect, right? Filipino artist that's now based in Calgary.
Yeah.
And Kapwani.
Oh my God, Kapwani Kiwanga.
Sobe Award winner.
Oh my God.
A few years back.
Yeah. And also, you know, we are really lucky like to have this piece because now she's really super well known like internationally. So we would not be able like to get this piece again. So we're really
and it's a small one. She does a lot of installations.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's pretty rare like you can install this. So this is not installed in our home. Of course, it's on wallpaper. In our home, it's not like on a white, but it was a better picture. So and this and this work is about kanga. So kanga are some big pieces of fabric in Tanzania, and on which are written those words. And she really is interested in how culture is transmitted like through other things than language that is spoken. Mm-hmm. And those are kind of the adage, how do you say that? Expressions. And then she cut it like only the place where there were those words, which are in the language.
Tanzanian,
anyway, exactly. Right? And she redid some kind of poems with different kinds of kangas. So this one is about wealth.
Yeah, and this artist also we had presented at Clark, and this is kind of how we established a first relationship, and then we started talking, and then Pascal was like, I think it would be really amazing to have this. So Absolutely. It's like different ways to get to know artists. Sometimes it's through artist run centers, sometimes it's through galleries, sometimes it's just through you know, social media. And then, you know, just as a recap, many ways to collect. Obviously, gallerists just keep on their just on their mailing list, see what's happening, but also studio visits, fundraisers. Sometimes you have to start slowly, you have to start small to actually build things up. I put master shows because it's worth just going to see all sorts of student exhibitions and sometimes just asking. And then that's the first way that you might be able to support. So anyone can collect. There's different ways. Don't be shy. Just start now.
Start now.
I think that's what we have to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, that's it.
Thank you so much, Roxanne and Pascal. That was an amazing presentation.
That's so long. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that was great. It was great. And I can't wait to speak to you more about your collection in our conversation after. So our next speakers are Jamie Cameron and Christopher Bredt. Jamie Cameron, now Professor Emerita, was a full-time faculty member at Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto from 1984 to 2020. One of Canada's most senior public law scholars, Cameron has served on law-related boards that include the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, the BC Civil Liberties Association, and the Board of Editors for Ontario Reports. Jamie is an appointed member of the Ontario and Nunavut Review Boards and has served on cultural boards that include the McMichael Canadian Art Collection and Canada's National Ballet School. She's currently on the board of directors for Art Canada Institute and the Inuit Art Foundation. She is a member of the Women's Art Council at the McMichael and is also on the board of Artworks for Cancer. Christopher Bredt is a senior litigation counsel in the Toronto office of Borden Ladner Gervais LLP, where he practices in areas of administrative, constitutional, corporate, commercial litigation. He is the past chair of Borden Ladner Gervais National Public Law Group and was selected by peers for inclusion in the best lawyers in Canada, administrative and public law, and recognizing l'Expert American Lawyer Guide to Leading 500 Lawyers in Canada. He has a BA and LLB from Western University and an LLM from Yale and a DSU Droit Administratif from the Université de Paris 2. He has taught law at the University of Toronto Law School from 1984 to 1990 and currently teaches a seminar on freedom of expression and the media at Osgoode Hall Law School. He served as a bencher of the Law Society of Ontario from 2008 to 2019 and as vice chair of the Law Society Tribunal Appeal Division from 2014 to 2019. In 2022, he was awarded the Law Society Medal for his contributions to the legal profession in Ontario. And over the years, since about 1987, about 35 years now, Chris and Jamie have been dedicated art collectors. And I will let you talk more about the collection then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor for us to be here on the panel, and it was just great to hear, from Roxanne and Pascal about our collection. We're not nearly as sophisticated as those. We came from a different way to collecting. Basically, Jamie and I are from the legal world, and when we decided to get married, Jamie was teaching at Cornell Law School in upstate New York, and I was living in Paris. We had to find a place where we could hang out together, so Toronto seemed to be convenient. And we moved to Toronto, and we bought a house, and we had nothing to put on the walls of the house except for student posters. So we started going out to art galleries, and one day, Jamie and I went to an auction at Waddington's, which was an Inuit art auction. And there was an Inuit art print that we both liked, but we didn't know anything at all about it. I mean, my parents had a bit of Inuit art when we were kids, but, and so as a lawyer, I don't like to go to court prepared. And as a collector, I was thinking, well, I should do some research here. But this was back in the 80s. It's pre-internet. It's not easy to do research the way it is now. So I went to the Yellow Pages and I looked up under art galleries, and there was a bunch of Inuit art galleries in the Yorkville area, and we went to a couple. But one of the galleries I went to, and I remember I was just, starting off my career. So it was a Saturday. I'm just in jeans and a sweat top. And I remember going to this gallery. We went upstairs. It was called Feely Fine Arts. And I get up to the top of the stairs and there's this immaculate gentleman there. He's got like a blue blazer and an ascot. He's got a shock of white hair. He's sitting behind this big glass desk. And here I come up looking like a bum. And, you know, I remember the first thing that he said to me was that, "Good afternoon, young man. Would you like to join me in a scotch?" And I'm going, well, this is pretty good. So I sat down and we had a scotch together, and I told him that I was interested in this print. He was very knowledgeable, and he gave me a biography of the artist and kind of told me roughly what he thought it would be worth. And so Jamie and I went to the auction. The first piece of art we bought at auction was this Inuit print by an artist from Cape Dorset. And after the auction, I said to Jamie, I said, you know, you should come back and meet this guy. He's just a wonderful guy. And we went back to the gallery in a weekend that followed. And, you know, ultimately, his name was Bud Feely. He'd been very active in the Inuit art community. He'd been on the Eskimo Art Council, and you can tell how long that was because nobody used the term Eskimo anymore. And he was like a mentor for us. And so we would go there just about every weekend. We would see pieces, and, you know, like Roxanne and Pascal, we didn't have a lot of money when we started collecting. So every piece we bought, like maybe $100 a month or something, until we had the pieces paid off. And I'll just tell one story, and then I'll let Jamie talk a bit about how our collection went off in different directions. But we were at Bud Feely's gallery one weekend, and there was a beautiful print there by Kanojawak. And the print was an early print from 1960. We'd seen it in a bunch of the books about Inuit art, and unfortunately it'd been sold. But the Bud said, well, you should meet the collector. He's a really interesting guy, and he's coming back in the afternoon. Anyway, we came back in the afternoon, and you know, we talked to him about the print, what a fabulous print it was. It was really a lovely conversation. Then at one point, Jamie says to him, he says, well, you must have a place in your house that this print is going to go. And, you know, understand that back then, every piece of art we bought, you know, we had a place that we could put it and so forth. And he said, well, actually, I think, you know, I'm probably just going to take it home and it's just going to go into storage. And we didn't say anything because, you know, it didn't want to be impolite. But I remember Jamie and I walking out, and we look at each other and we go, can you believe that? He's buying this incredible print, and he doesn't even have a place to put it. He's just going to go into storage. And what I say to Jamie these days is, you can tell you've become a collector when you just see pieces and you love them. It doesn't matter. You're just going to buy them, and you'll worry about where it's going to go in due course. So why don't I let Jamie speak for a bit here?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say, Pascal and Roxanne, wow, I really admire your confidence and your sense of self. That was a really peppy, presentation. And also, I just like to thank Karen Tam and Griffin Art Projects on camera for inviting us to participate in this. It's always a great joy to talk about art and to hear other people talk about art. But just to add a couple of things to what Chris has said already, is that one is that, you know, for us, the importance of a mentor in the early years could not be understated. You know, we might have bought 3 or 4 pieces and then stopped. Who knows? It didn't happen that way, but Bud Feely was our mentor. And back in the day, we would go to the gallery every weekend. And one of my little stories, we've got thousands of collecting stories. He had these beautiful walrus carvings that were in this wonderful Inukjuak stone, which is very distinctive type of carving stone for the Inuit people. And I would go every single weekend. I'd go in there and I'd point to the #1 walrus, and I'd say to Bud, I'd say, well, Bud, sell me the walrus. And he'd say, not for sale, sweetheart. And the next week I'd come back and say, sell me the walrus. And he'd say, not today, honey. And this went on for a couple of years. So on my 40th birthday, Chris did kind of a deal behind my back with Bud. We were invited over to Bud's place for a little drink before a birthday dinner in my honor. And sitting on a pedestal with a ribbon around his neck was the walrus. So, I mean, we had a very, very special relationship with Bud, and that helped us to learn about Inuit art and to build our confidence and knowledge. So the other thing that was very important to us when we first started to collect art, which by the way was 1987, I think, is learning. So we didn't really know anything about art. We're not art trained. My parents certainly weren't art collectors. I grew up in a smelter town in Trail, BC. So we bought the books and we would sit in bed together. And there's a famous book called The Inuit Print. And we would turn the pages and we'd look at the images of the prints and we'd say, oh my goodness, I can't imagine that we'd ever in our lives have a chance to acquire one of these prints because there's only 50 of them. There's only 50 of them in the whole existence of the world. And yet, you know, the other thing about being a collector is if you know what you're interested in, you learn to be patient. And so over the years, we were able to add many of those pieces to our collection. But I think what I was supposed to be talking about is that we didn't stop at Inuit art. We built a relationship with Bud Feely, and that took us mainly to Cape Dorset, King Knight, and that was the foundation of our collection. But then our curiosity took us elsewhere, and we began to collect Inuit art from other Inuit communities in the Eastern Arctic and the Central Arctic. But then we didn't even stop there. Our collection today includes Inuit graphics, Inuit carvings, and we have a very, very committed interest to Inuit textiles and wall hangings. We'll see one of them in the pieces we've chosen to show you. But it didn't even stop there because we would come west to Vancouver quite often because that's where I grew up. And we went sea kayaking in Haida Gwaii a couple of times in the early 90s. And we would visit, when we were early in our Inuit art collecting, we would visit galleries out in BC, and they always had Northwest Coast art. So we always break down. We weren't going to start collecting Northwest Coast art, but we started adding Northwest Coast art to our collection. And then lo and behold, one of our best friends who's a collector, he lives in Seattle, and Seattle is one of the centers for glass art. And so we were not going to collect glass art, but we eventually broke down and we now have a significant collection of glass art. And we have other things as well. We have art by other Indigenous artists, woodlands and other kinds of Indigenous artists such as Norval Morrisseau and Daphne Odjig, Alex Janvier, and others. We have a collection of art from Quebec artists, Jean-Paul Dallaire, Paul Beaulieu, and a few others, Bellefleur. And then we also collect an American sort of landscape colorist. So we live in a museum, and one of the things I think we'll probably talk about when we get to our slides is donating to institutions. That's one of the things we do. We're committed to it for philanthropic reasons, but also for practical reasons, which is there's no room in our house. So Chris, back to you, and I don't know if we should look at the slides. What do you think?
Yeah, why don't we start in on the slides so we can leave a little bit of time for some conversations and so forth. Okay, so let's, so this is one of our favorite pieces, and it's by one of our favorite artists. And, you know, Pascal and Roxanne were talking about building relationships with artists. Well, Billy, we spent time on the land with him. He stayed at our house. We just, he's such a wonderful guy. So this is Billy's tribute to Kinojawak. And if you know anything about Kinojawak's work, she did the Enchanted Owl. That this kind of loons with the tail feathers are very, very reminiscent of what Kinojawak might do. And this piece You can see it's called Swimming Loons. It's a tribute. You can see it was done of muskox horn. And then there's antler in the background to hold it up, kind of a ribboning effect. And it's all on a stone base. And this was a piece that we acquired out at a show in the Spirit Wrestler Gallery in Vancouver. And it was Billy's first major show, and it sold out. And I have to say, there was lineups and so forth, and you got to draw a number. And I remember the number we drew was number 8, and we were quite downhearted actually, because there was this was one of 2 pieces that we really were keen to get. So we waited, and when 8 came up, the gallery owner, who we knew well, had a big smile on his face. He said, "By the way," he says, "the tribute to Kenojawak still available." So it's a great piece. We've loaned it to a number. It was in a show at the National Gallery called Sakayan. And then there was a retrospective of Billy's work that was at the rooms in St. John's, Newfoundland. And one of the things that we love to do is to collect some artists in depth and to help them by loaning pieces so that they can do retrospectives and so forth. There's one other picture here that I thought, if you can bring up the next slide, Karen, and maybe Jamie, you can just talk a bit, because you were here when Billy was.
So Billy is, just a very, very special person. He's a gentle person. He's a thoughtful man, and he follows an Inuit lifestyle. We were fortunate enough to visit him in Labrador, and Billy actually, we had a porcupine stew that was made from the first porcupine that Billy hunted, and they saved it in the freezer and made this porcupine stew for us to eat. And I have to tell you, I'm not vegetarian, but I'm fairly squeamish, if we could put it that way. And I ate the porcupine stew. But anyway, the reason for this picture is just to tell you a little bit about Billy. He's a very, he's a man of great ethical integrity. And the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric project in Newfoundland and Labrador was enormously controversial a few years ago. And this is Billy. Billy went on a hunger strike with 2 other Inuit individuals to protest the Muskrat Falls project, because it was at a point where lands were going to be flooded that would fill the waters with, toxic substances that would interrupt the marine and wildlife. And this was taken in Ottawa when he came to Ottawa with the others to make his presentation. And those who were close to Billy were actually quite worried that he would give his life. He would give his life to defend his principles. And we had huge respect for that, but we're extremely relieved when he did. He and the others resolved their hunger strike. I think it was after 17 days. Another little thing about Billy is that I should have put a link on the slide, but just in the last year, he saved a snowy owl from ravens who were bullying it. And there's a little story. If you Google it, you'll pull it up and you'll see there are photos and a little account of what he did to save the snowy owl. So that just, it just speaks again about the kind of person that Billy is. And just a last comment about the tribute to Kenojawak. If you, we won't go back to the slide, but the caribou ribboning in the background, we'd never seen caribou antler worked that way before. And so it was just, when I saw this piece for the first time, I fell down. It was so unlike any piece of Inuit sculpture I had seen before, and I instantly fell in love with it. And that's one of the things that is a bond between the 6 pieces we're showing you today. And I think I should probably be quiet and let us move on to the next piece. Do you want to say a few words, Chris, and then I can add maybe?
Oh, you go ahead, Jamie.
Well, this is a wall hanging by Janet Nunick, who is from Kamanitoak, which is formerly Baker Lake. And so I mentioned before that we've got a very keen interest in wall hangings. And so Janet is an Inuit woman who has a remarkable gift for making these richly stitched wall hangings, which are autobiographical in nature and steeped in memory. And you can't see the stitching very well, and you can't see the size of this either. It's a very, very large wall hanging, and it's called Eagle's Shadow. So there are two shadows. There's one on the far right of the wall hanging, just near, that's the Thelon River, just where that red piece is. And then the other one is over toward the, I don't want to call it a horseshoe, but the bracket that is stitched in the wall hanging. And it's autobiographical because at the top left, that's her mother. So that's part of her mother's amauti that is stitched into the wall hanging. The kayak is her father, who was a kayak maker. The woman with her hands up is her little sister. The individual with the blue pants is her brother. And the one who's skipping rope is Janet herself. And when she talks about this piece, she wanted to show her family. And she said she was always a happy person. And again, it's the photograph doesn't show the detail on the stitching. I'd love to have a Count the Stitches contest for this wall hanging, because there are thousands upon thousands of stitches, and it's a monumental and extraordinary piece of work. Chris, do you want to maybe just, if we go to the next slide, you could put it in context a bit?
Yeah, so again, Janet is someone who's very near and dear to our heart. I first met her at a show, again, out in British Columbia, and we spent a fair bit of time together. And then because of the show, I'd encouraged the curator from the McMichael to go and see it. She decided that this work was so fabulous that they had to do a show at the McMichael. And so we loaned a bunch of pieces, and Janet came down for the show. And I'll let Jamie tell the story about when Janet came to the McMichael and saw all of her pieces together, because for Inuit artists, they make these pieces and then they go out to the world and they don't really see them again because they live in remote communities. So, but I will tell, but why don't you go ahead and just tell a quick story about Janet coming up to the McMichael?
So it was during Toronto Art Fair. And so there was a tour to the McMichael. There was one of these bus tours, and I don't know, there might have been 30 or 40 people. And Sarah Milroy was leading the tour, and the first part of it was the part of the McMichael that had 10 or 12 or maybe more of Janet's wall hangings. And we were bringing Janet in and introducing her to Sarah, and we were at the front of this group of people it was a pack, and they were moving toward the exhibition space. And Janet became overwhelmed. She became extremely emotional. So what we did was we took her into the exhibition on her own for just a few moments so that she could see it before she was put in the position of having 30 or 40 strangers looking at it with her. And once we did that, she settled down and spoke beautifully about each of the pieces. But it was just it was a moving moment to see what it meant to her to be able to be reunited with her work and to see it in an exhibition space. So Chris,
let's go to the next slide, Jamie, so we can leave a little bit of time here.
I feel like I'm doing all the talking.
Go ahead and talk about this one. I'll talk about the next ones, and then
I'll be faster on this. So in 2015, we donated, I think it was 49 or 15 pieces from our Northwest Coast collection to the McMichael, and it had a beautiful exhibition called Transforming Spirit. And the reason we did it was to bring Northwest Coast art into profile in Central Canada, but also as a measure of respect to the artists. We wanted them to have a public profile. And the two pieces from the Northwest Coast that we're showing you today are both pieces we donated. even though as soon as we finished donating them, we started buying them again because we missed them so much. And so we're kind of back where we started with a whole new set of Northwest Coast art, and we're happy. But the reason I chose this one, or we chose this one to show, is that I just love this one so much, and I really miss it. It's called Weeping Grizzly Bear. It's by Francis Horn. I think that's supposed to be senior, isn't it, Chris?
Junior.
Is it junior? Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, it's a gorgeous mask. It's only shown from a side view there. And the one thing I'll tell you about the artist, he's Coast Salish, and I didn't know this before today. I was looking up the artist, and he said that he had been abused by his stepfather when he was young, and when he became a carver, he coped with that a little bit by carving tears into his masks. I just found that so moving. So that even though we've donated the mask, I still have an abiding attachment to it, and that's why we included it today. So we should go to the next slide.
So this is a set of 3 quite fantastic masks that come from the Kwakiutl. So the Kwakiutl is a Northwest Coast tribe that is, heading north up the coast, and they have these incredible potlatch ceremonies. And part of what they do is they have these, they're called hamatsa masks. There's 3 of them. The one in the lower left is called Crooked Beak. The one in the far right is called Hawk, and the one in the middle is called Raven. And it's very difficult to find these masks because mostly they're done for ceremonial purposes, and they actually dance these at potlatches. You think they'd look heavy, but they're made out of red cedar, and they're actually quite light to lift. And we were the way we got into this, it took us forever to get a set of 3 because the artist who did them, Chief Henry Speck Jr., does only 1 or 2 masks a year, and as I say, most of them go for ceremonial purposes. We had first seen a show of his work before we were collecting Northwest Coast art at the Derek Simpkins Gallery, and I remember asking around it because I remember seeing these are like done in the old style, like Willie Seaweed and so forth, and eventually one of the dealers said, "Oh yeah, that's Chief Henry Speck Jr. and he is the master of these kind of masks." And so we bought our first, and then we let the gallery know that if other masks became available, we wanted to collect an entire set. And so we used to have these hanging in our house, and you can see they need more space than they have here, but it's just fabulous to have all 3 of the masks together. And the one thing I'd add before we go on to the last couple of slides is that we like them so much that we've bought another Crooked Beak mask by Henry Speck so that we still have one around the house. So we can go to the next slide.
We'll move on now to just a couple of pieces of glass art, and we'll try and do this quickly. So April Sergeant is an artist who was born in Seattle, Washington. She studied in Australia, and she moved from her beginnings in glass blowing to working in engraved glass. And this is actually a wall hanging, and it's right above my computer here. And it's very special. Chris can maybe explain the technology a little bit better. But what's really interesting about it is who April Sergeant is. She's a marine ecologist who has a huge interest in cultivating public awareness about climate change and the anthropogenic impact on the environment. And so she's this is done in Antarctica. She was at the Palmer Station as an artist with a research science team. And this was one of the results of that project. She's also been with a scientific team in Hawaii working on a project to do with monk seals. And she's also worked as well in California and Alaska. And so she's really quite an inspiring artist. She describes herself as smaller than a speck of dust, and she likes to imagine that even her tiniest actions can have a little bit of an effect. And her engravings serve as an archival record. They're really amazing. She calls herself a keeper of the time and a keeper of a dying environment. And so that's one of the pieces of glass art that we have that we really respect and admire a great deal. We really love this artist.
Yeah, just a little bit about the technique. This cameo carved glass. So what she'd do, she would work from like a lot of times people see this and they think it's a photograph, but it's a piece of glass, and she carves into the glass, and as you go deeper into the glass, you carve through the dark outer layer and create the image through the lighter layers that are in behind it. So it's quite, and she learned that from a Czech master. It was kind of a lost art, and she's really has revived it. Let's go to the last slide then. So the last artist we thought we'd talk a little bit about is Karen Lamonti, who's an American glass artist who lives now in Czechoslovakia.
Czech Republic.
That's right. And she likes to work on women's dresses and so forth. And there was a big show of hers called Absence Adorned. And basically what she does is you can see the form of the women in behind, but it's all about the dresses and so forth. So she had a Fulbright fellowship, and this came from one of her series where she spent 18 months in Japan studying kimonos and making kimonos. And then when she came back to Prague, she started working on this series of kimonos, and you can see that it's quite stunning, the translucent nature, and you can see the form of the woman in behind and so forth. So she's very thoughtful, and we're just delighted to have one of the pieces of hers in our collection.
We'll only say that this is an enormously complicated glass sculpture, and she is an individual who has extraordinary mastery of her craft, as well as unbelievable commitment to the art forms and the reason for doing the art. So just to what sort of holds the six pieces we've shown you today together is that, to our minds anyway, each of the six shows an artist who is working with a vision, but also in a way that demonstrates an extreme mastery of technique and style and workmanship. And so those are some of the criteria we used in choosing these pieces today. And I think we all want to get to questions, don't we?
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was wonderful to see some examples of the works in your collection, and just it's like the stunning works in both collections. So what we're gonna do is have a conversation in like Q&A, and if anyone in our audience wants to ask questions, Faune, should they do it in the chat box, or?
You can do it in the chat box, or you can use the Q&A dialog box. We have already 2 questions, so if you want to get started, or do you want me to read them?
Let's go with the audience questions, and then I'll answer.
Perfect.
I'll ask some questions after.
Okay, so we have a question from Andrew Booth, and he asks, at what point in your collecting did you develop themes or streams that focus the types of work you collect? How did you determine what these themes would be?
for us, if I can go, I guess Pascal, he started in a very intuitive way, I guess, in the beginning. And I think it stems really from preoccupations that are in our art milieu, I guess, in Montreal. Things that I'm also really thinking about while doing the programming with committees at the various artist run centers we work with, and just stemming from conversations we have, and it became more and more important for us to have works that had something to say and had that kind of represented global issues like we mentioned, and that became kind of the line for our collection. But that can mean so many different things, right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be necessarily political. It can be just can be various things, but this is really what drives us, I guess, now.
Mm-hmm. But it's not, there's not a exact time, like, okay, after 4 years, it's really getting together, like after year after year, getting your...
Yeah, it's tighter and tighter, I would say.
Exactly.
Yeah. And some of the previous works, then I think maybe just one work, the first work that Pascal acquired, he actually gave away because this made no more sense in the collection.
Exactly.
But all the rest were like,
first one,
and some have been given to museums, but it's kind of like someone told me in the past, you can't get rid of any of your tattoos because even though they're mistakes, they kind of still are part of who you are. So in a way, they kind of talk about the path that we've been on, and I think it's interesting that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, what I would say is that it's kind of organic in the sense that it was happenstance, I think, that we started collecting Inuit art. But as you start to get into the milieu, then sometimes you just like our initial focus had been on Cape Dorset, and I had to go out to Winnipeg on business at one point, and they had a show on at the Winnipeg Art Gallery that was called The Art and Expression of the Netsilik, which is all of the artwork from the Central Arctic, Spence Bay, Joe Haven, Pelly Bay. And that was not something we'd seen a lot of in Toronto at Feely Fine Art. And I was just kind of blown away by that. So we started, it's like, we didn't know much about it. So, what I always say to collectors is knowledge is power. So we started buying books, we started reading about it, we started going to all the shows, and then we started seeing pieces and we said, boy, that's a great piece, wouldn't we get that? And so it was not like all of a sudden we decided, oh, we're going to collect a different community. There was an initial exposure, there was some reading and getting in depth, and then starting to say, wow, there's some great pieces, and you start going off in some different directions that you hadn't really started off at the very beginning.
I would just add that there was a lot of serendipity involved, and but at the same time, I think that our collection expanded because we were open to a certain degree to new collections and new forms of collecting, and we allowed ourselves to follow our hearts, and that's what we did. I mean, we had to work within the limits of who we are, our space and our finances, but we allowed ourselves to follow our hearts. And I think that's kind of the way I'd describe it.
I've got a question about collecting together, and how does collaboration work in your collecting practice as a couple? Do you have conversations about what to collect, and I'm assuming you have had differences when it comes to the art you want to purchase?
Well, we are pretty in phase. It's not a hard, we're not having a hard time deciding together what we want. I think that we propose each other's oh, this might be interesting.
You propose.
Okay, I propose most of the time. Look at that. I was telling you it was easy. It's not easy at all.
No, but Pascal is the one who's I would say, if we're being completely transparent here, Pascal is the one who's driven to by this collection, and I love contributing to it. So he's doing the research, he's getting the PDFs, he's doing all of that, and then he's like, hey, and then and then I'm like, how serious are you about this? Okay, so we'll talk about it, and then we talk about it, what it represents in our collection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Yeah. But usually it's quite easy because we are, we talk a lot with other artists, galleries and everything. So we are kind of in phase with what's happening now and what is pretty interesting and what should be exactly supported, so it's,
I mean, we agreed on the crazy house we have. So already we have
amazing house.
So already, if we can get along with these bold choices, we visit the same shows, so we already have even though the aesthetics are quite different from our house, we kind of, it resonates. Often it resonates the same way in our hearts.
Totally.
And minds. Yeah.
I would say, you notice that Chris and I are not sitting together. I would just say that we're very individual in our approach to collecting, but we function as a team. And so our tastes and our interest in collecting, there's a high degree of overlap, but not always. And so we have found ways to work that out. But I would say that Chris is more the seeker than I am. He's the one who goes out and finds the art more than I do. And he's also the one who's more knowledgeable than I am. But our basic rule of thumb is that we should both agree, but where we don't, each is sometimes allowed to have a piece of choice. I don't know if you agree with that, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, we work as a team. We're both very passionate about the art form. And what I would say is that if the pieces are not that expensive, then each of us can just get whatever we want, even if the other person not that keen about it. But when it comes to significant pieces, usually, we have to work together because there's only so many of those that we can acquire within our budget. And what I'd say, sometimes it's just, we see a piece, we both love it, and it's like a 30-second discussion. We were out west for this opening at the O'Dane Gallery, and we stopped by the Doug Reynolds Gallery. Had this beautiful piece by Susan Point. We've been looking for a piece by Susan forever. And it was like, we looked at each other and said, oh yeah, that's happening. But why don't you tell the story about one of my favorite pieces by Charlie Udjuk?
Well, this is a piece that's actually a very, very good piece. We saw it first in the Marion Scott Gallery many years ago in the summer. And Chris liked it a lot, and I did not like it so much. And it was quite pricey. So we went home and spent the winter in Toronto. We went back to Marion Scott the following spring, and it was still there. And I looked at it and I said, we would regret it if we didn't get this piece. And so we did. And it's a fantastic piece. I mean, Chris was the one who spotted it and formed the early attachment to it. But I would today count it as one of the pieces I think is one of the best in our collection. So we were fortunate to have the chance to go back and acquire that piece for sure.
We have more questions by the audience. So Karen, if you don't mind, I'll read one.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, perfect. So Nicholas, and I'll try to put it together with Pullman's question as well. Nicholas asks, now that you have acquired greater experience and knowledge about what you are collecting, and now that your collections are large and complex, how do you feel about using art advisors? Where do you get advice how to refine your collections further? Or do you keep doing it alone?
I think Chris and Jamie were talking about like mentoring, and I think at first for myself, because I knew another collector that really helped me at first, like to consider great works, So, but after doing some researches and reading a lot, you are getting confident. So part of it is, part of it is community, part of it is like speaking with other people, part of it is like ourselves, but
Asking questions,
exactly asking questions and reading a lot. So I think we are building confidence like more and more. So I think we basically finally work alone, and now we are even mentors for other people. We have like some neighbors here that has like a huge house, huge empty house, kind of a dream house for collectors, because our walls are full. We would love to have new walls. So and we had a discussion, and I think they were really getting almost anxious about like seeing all those white walls. So, and they remember that we were collectors, so they asked us like to have a visit at their home and try to talk about art and just help them in a way to be. And we were really pretty clear. What did we
I asked them,
tell them?
You have a choice to make. Do you want to decorate your walls, or do you want to be involved in a collection in contemporary art and have a link with this community, and have like an impact on a long-term base? And they were like, B, we want B. And I was like, okay, well, you don't know what you're getting yourselves into. And then, but they like, when we're talking about communicating passion, like they're like, it's been 2 months and they have so many works already. And we're like, okay.
Like 8 wonderful works, like in 2 single
they're
months.
Reading, we lent them all these books, they're doing their homework,
everything.
And it's great to see like, okay, so they're going to be able in a few years to communicate that passion also and become mentors for other people. And I think that's really beautiful.
It is. I don't know if it answers well the question, but I think
what I would say is that when we first started to collect, a mentor was really important because we didn't really have the knowledge base. And when you first collect, everything looks great. I mean, there's lots of things. And the thing about artists is they're kind of like you and me in some ways. Some days we get up in the morning and we're firing on all cylinders and we bang away and we're just like at the top of our game. Some days we wake up and we're not feeling that great, maybe we're a little bit hungover, and we kind of drag our butt through the days. And artists are like that. And you might like the first piece you see by an artist, but until you see a range of work and understand the artist's career, where he started or where she started, where she is now and where she's going, it's hard to understand. And having a mentor, at the outset is quite important. But as you build up the knowledge base, then you understand where the artist is at, where the artist is within the broader community, where they're at within their career. Are they doing work now that is getting new and creative, or are they reworking old themes? And so I think that when you start off, it really is important. But as you get on in your collecting career, a lot of times, if you're a serious collector, you can often know more about the artist than the dealers that are selling the work. They may not have been with the artist for as long. And if you've been collecting for 10 or 15 years, you've got a very deep knowledge base.
Yeah, I think I would just add that, we've developed our own sense of curatorship, and it's a function of our eye. It's a function of our knowledge, because we've invested a lot of time in learning about art because we love it. And it's a function also of our experience. And so we don't get into a new art form or head off in another direction without doing a little bit of research and satisfying ourselves that we're ready to take a new step. And that's served us well over the years.
Chris and Jamie, would you say that you have become mentors to other collectors?
I think so, but I would say, we're part of a community of collectors. And so there's some mentorship, but everybody mentors everybody else, and
Yeah, and
you know,
inspire everyone else.
Yeah.
You're muted, Karen.
Yeah, I realized that. I guess one thing I wanted to ask too, like in regards to community and support, is do you always have a relationship with an artwork or an artist before you buy it? And like, how do you nurture, and you mentioned this briefly, but how do you nurture the relationships with galleries, gallerists, with artists, with museums and curators? And yeah, maybe I'll stop there. More questions after.
I will just say that we're just present. You know, that's the way we do it. We're just present. So we put ourselves out there, and that's how we learn to make connections.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is, like the piece that we showed you, the tribute to Kanojawak, like we first saw his work in a back room at the Spirit Wrestler Gallery. There was a whole back room full of pieces, and I saw this fabulous piece, and I remember saying to the gallery owner, I said, "This is a really interesting piece. Who's the artist?" And the artist was Billy Gauthier. They had just started bringing some of his work in. I had no idea who he was. I'd never heard of him, never seen any pieces by him, but I thought this was just a really fabulous piece. So we bought the piece, and then, you know, eventually, as you started bringing other pieces, we realized that this was really someone who was quite special. And, you know, so we started to collect extensively. And I think the relationship that we developed with Billy, we met him at his show, we spent time with him at his family's camp in Labrador, and it just became, you know, we love his work. We think he's a fabulous artist, and we love to support him, but he's also a good friend, and we just like to spend time with him. And we also like it that we have a very extensive body of his work, so that when other people come to the realization that we can, this is a great artist who needs to be shown, we can loan the pieces so they can do a show. Because what happens a lot of times with Indigenous art is the pieces get scattered to the wind, and it's really hard to construct a show that is of museum level. So that yeah, I mean, it sometimes you know, it's a little piece in a back room that nobody else has paid any attention to that just catches your eye.
Yeah, I would add that when working in an artist run center, the relationship with artists is really important has been really important in my life for a really long time, because these relationships often last through time, especially when they're local artists. And Pascal, since the beginning, he's always wanted to meet the artists when possible, obviously, from who we purchase work. So even like Joseph Tsiga here in the back, it was during COVID and we couldn't meet him in person, but through the gallerist, we organized a Zoom, and we were like, okay, we just want to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And then we chatted for like 2 hours, something like that. It
was amazing.
But, you know, it's like these things where you're like, you're really curious. And of course, it's not the artist's responsibility to talk with all the collectors, and, you know, but also not all the collectors are interested. So, but we find that this bond is really kind of, yeah, makes just the relationship and the relationship to the work even more profound. And this idea of community becomes really tangible, and
it's capital.
Yeah.
It's all about the fabulous people that are in that community. To be honest, you know, it's even the pieces, like for some of them, there's so much friendship, like with the artist behind that too, that it gives also all that deepness, like to the piece, because it's not only about, you know, the physical thing that you hang on your wall or that you put on the pedestal. It's about the people, the galleries that is super passionate, that you know, sell that to you, and you speak to the artist, and then you develop like friendship with artists that you invite home to, you know, it's all about that. And that is fabulous. It is incredible.
There's not a lot of artistic spheres where that can happen, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing the stories and your collections with the Griffin audience. Really appreciate it. I'll just pass the floor back to Fani, who will just kind of let us know what's next.
Yeah, so thank you everyone so much for joining us. This conversation is just buzzing, so we want to continue it. We have Chat and Choose coming next, which is an informal discussion about the panel. You can join us on this link that I'm posting right now for everyone to join. And yeah, thank you so much.
We have more questions.
Yeah, we'll have more questions.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say, I saw that there's a question for Nicolas, but if you join us over there, then we can answer that question also.
Yeah, I already saved that.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Thank you very much.
so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.